It started with a shoe. Just one, caked in dust, its stitching frayed, its rubber sole stiff with time and cold. A man named Elliot Granger found it while spelunking through a limestone cave system in Central Oregon, one that rarely saw visitors due to flooding and unstable terrain. He was 64, retired, and had taken up cave mapping as a hobby. He wasn't supposed to be there, but that's exactly why he was. The shoe was half buried in a narrow crevice near a rockfall, curled unnaturally, as though it had been crushed long ago under something heavy. There was something odd about it, not just its childlike size or the way it seemed placed rather than dropped. What made Granger stop cold was the logo on the side. A small, barely faded tag inside the shoe confirmed what he feared. It belonged to Adrian Klein. Adrian Klein, aged 12, one of the 7 kids who vanished without a trace during a school hike in 2001. I know this because I was on that hike, and I still don't remember how I got out. There were 13 of us that day. The hike was part of a field trip, a nature science module organized by Whitman Elementary, a small public school nestled on the outskirts of Baker City, Oregon. The kind of school where every teacher knew your name, and most of the town had gone there at some point. It was early October, still warm but with that creeping cold in the air that told you the season was turning. The route was familiar, at least to the adults. Every year, the 5th and 6th graders did the same 3-mile loop into the edge of Malheur National Forest. Nothing dangerous, not steep, not deep woods, just pines, dry leaves, and the distant sound of a creek we weren't allowed to cross. 2 teachers went with us, Mr. Hollenbeck and Mrs. Crane, plus 1 parent volunteer, Mrs. Sisto, Adrian's mother. The 13 of us, 12 kids and me, set off in the morning with trail mix and canteens and laminated maps. I still have mine. I found it in a box of my childhood things after I moved out of my parents' house. It's covered in annotations I don't remember making. Notes like don't look behind the rocks and ask him why the trees don't match. And then, in my handwriting, definitely mine, across the bottom corner. She watches from under the roots. The incident, as the papers later called it, happened about 90 minutes into the hike. We reached a fork in the trail, one that wasn't on the map. Hollenbeck seemed confused, walked ahead a few feet, and turned back with a shrug. He decided to let us vote. Should we take the mystery path that sloped gently downhill toward what looked like a thicket of birch trees, or stick to the known trail? We were kids. We chose the mystery path. The last thing I remember with clarity is stepping off the trail and hearing the sound of a crow, loud and abrupt, as if it had been startled out of a nightmare. Then nothing. When I came to, I was sitting on a park bench outside the ranger station. My socks were damp. My hands were shaking, one of them bleeding slightly from what looked like a thorn scratch. A park ranger was crouched in front of me, gently asking my name. They told me I had walked into the station alone. Early the next morning, barefoot. They asked where the others were. I couldn't answer. I didn't know. That was 24 years ago. For months, the town was gripped by panic. Helicopters scanned the forest. Volunteer search parties combed the area. Dogs were brought in from 3 states. Not a trace. No backpacks. No voices. No sign of any of the 12 missing kids or the 3 adults. The media tore the story apart. Theories were everywhere. Mass animal attack, rogue cults, landslide swallowing them whole. But there were no signs of struggle. And the terrain hadn't shifted. Then people started talking about the forest. About other disappearances in the 1940s. About the old creek path, a phrase whispered by older locals that never showed up on any map. One of the searchers, an old logger named Buck Caro, claimed he found symbols carved into a tree trunk near where the trail should have ended. He said the wood looked wrong, too dark, and the marks bled sap like open wounds. He refused to go back. Died in a house fire a few months later. Some said he lit it himself. I went on to live a mostly normal life. I was the only survivor, the only lead, but no one ever pressed too hard. Maybe they felt sorry for me. Maybe they thought I had blocked it all out. But the truth is, something was always wrong. For years, I had recurring dreams, of walking endlessly through pine trees that never ended. Of hearing laughter in the distance that stopped whenever I turned toward it. Of seeing flashes of red between the trees, like a jacket sleeve or a ribbon. And sometimes, of a woman standing in the creek, barefoot, hair over her face, holding a shoe. When I saw the news about the cave discovery, I vomited. It was a Facebook post, shared by a local news affiliate. They didn't say much, just that the shoe had been positively identified as belonging to Adrian Klein, and that investigators were planning a search of the surrounding area. I knew where that cave system was. I also knew it was 217 miles from where we had vanished. And I knew I had to go back. I hadn't been back to Oregon in over a decade. Not since my father died and I sold the house. Even then, I didn't go near the forest. I couldn't, but the cave was calling, in that quiet way nightmares do. No urgency, just inevitability. So I packed a bag, left a vague note for my wife, and took the first flight west. I didn't tell anyone why I was going. The area around the cave was remote. To get there, you had to park near a service road that had long since overgrown. Then hike 2 miles through dense brush. I brought a flashlight, a backup headlamp, gloves, and a climbing harness. The news said the cavers who found Adrian's shoe had marked the spot with flagging tape. I found it after an hour of searching. A narrow fissure in the rock, not even chest wide, partially hidden by a slab of collapsed limestone. The kind of place a child could fit through, but not come back out. I crouched at the entrance. My heart was thundering, but my limbs moved on their own. I slid inside. The cave opened quickly, more of a hollow tube than a tunnel, its walls rounded and veined with mineral streaks. My headlamp caught something glinting ahead, a metallic tag bolted to the rock. Surveyed 1984 OCS 14. Granger hadn't gone far in when he found the shoe. I recognized the spot instantly, a depression in the rock shaped like a crouched body. That's where it was. The shoe was gone now, taken for evidence. But something else was there. A strip of paper, folded 4 times, tucked into the crack behind where the shoe had rested. I opened it. It was lined notebook paper, yellowed at the edges. A child's handwriting, shaky. It said, "If we leave the circle, we can't come back. Tell Mom I'm sorry I didn't believe her." There was no name, but I recognized the writing. It was Marcy Bishop's. She was 11 when we vanished. She used to doodle spirals in her notebooks, just like the one in the corner of the page. And just like the one in the corner of my old map. I climbed deeper into the cave. It felt wrong, not claustrophobic, but like the rock itself was too quiet. Not a drop of water. No distant echo. I found more. Another shoe, smaller. A girl's, wedged under a protruding stone shelf. A plastic barrette. A laminated school ID, faded, water-damaged. It belonged to Benjamin Calder, age 10. None of this made sense. The forest we vanished in was 200 miles away. How had the belongings of 5 different kids from our group ended up here? I didn't believe in teleportation, or portals, or anything like that. Still don't, but I had to accept something unnatural happened. Or maybe something very human, and very dark. Further inside, the air changed. I felt it before I heard it. A low thrum, like the echo of distant machinery, but older. More hollow. It came from a narrow shaft to my left, barely big enough to crawl through. It wasn't on the survey map I'd seen. I made the mistake of shining my light into it. And I saw it. A carving. Not natural, not eroded. It was clean, symmetrical, and deep, cut into the stone like someone had taken hours. A circle within a circle, interlocking lines like tree roots or veins. Below it, a name. Alma. I recoiled. Alma Crane. One of the adults. Mrs. Crane. The teacher who never came back. Why was her name etched into stone? Who carved it? And why did I suddenly feel like I was being watched? I left, not out of fear, but because I knew if I went deeper, I might not come back. And I needed answers first. I spent the next 3 days combing through every article, every archived report, every interview from the 2001 incident. I found something strange buried in the county's incident logs. A ranger, Paul Mendoza, reported seeing a group of children near the South Trailhead at dusk the day after the disappearance. He said they were standing still, not moving, facing away from the trail. When he called out, they vanished. He was dismissed. The report was sealed. Another thread, in 1976, a school field trip from Pendleton went missing in the forest for 7 hours. All the students were found safe, but not one remembered being lost. They all said the same thing. We followed the girl with the ribbon. When asked who that was, they all pointed to an empty part of the group photo. And every time, they pointed to the same place. I dug up more on Alma Crane. Her sister, Ruth, ran a bookstore in Eugene. I drove there, not sure what I expected. Ruth looked surprised when I introduced myself. Not startled, just resigned. Like she'd been waiting. You were the one who came back, she said. I nodded. She poured me tea. Didn't ask why I was there. Just said, she drew those symbols as a girl. Our mother hated it. Said it wasn't pretend. Said Alma would bring something back with her one day. I showed her the photo I'd taken of the carving. Ruth stared at it for a long time. Then she said, she always said they watch from the still places. And if they take a name, it's never yours again. I left that night. I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing that sound, the thrum, from the cave. It wasn't just in my ears anymore. It was behind my eyes. And when I looked out the motel window, I thought I saw movement in the tree line. Not a person, not an animal, just the suggestion of something walking between the trees. And in its hand, something red, like a ribbon. I drove until morning, half delirious, stopping only for gas and bitter coffee. The image of that ribbon in the trees burned into the back of my mind. I told myself it was nothing. A trick of the light, sleep deprivation, old trauma, but deep down, I knew better. You don't imagine something that's specific unless some part of your brain already remembers it. I didn't head home. I went to Baker City. My hometown. The place I'd avoided for almost 15 years. The place where this all began. It hadn't changed much. Small towns rarely do. The same dusty hardware store. The same faded mural on Main Street. The same people pretending not to look when someone unfamiliar walks by. Only I wasn't unfamiliar. Not here. I was the kid who came back. The miracle boy. People didn't talk to me back then. They whispered. I stopped at the library. Found the old newspaper archives. Started reading anything I could from the weeks before and after our field trip. I was looking for something, anything, that hinted at what had happened. Then I found something that chilled me. An interview with a custodian from the school, dated 2 days before the hike. He'd filed a maintenance report about a door in the basement that wouldn't stay closed. Said he kept locking it, and it would be wide open the next day. Smells like the earth, he wrote. Like wet stone. And something else, like rot. The principal dismissed it, said it was an old root cellar no longer in use. But I remembered that basement. Barely. A flicker. I think we were taken there once when the fire alarm went off. Just for a minute, I remembered the way the light from the stairwell didn't quite reach the floor. Like the shadows were thicker than they should have been. I went to the school. It was still operational, though now it only served younger grades. I told the front desk I was a journalist working on a piece about local history. The woman smiled, handed me a visitor badge, and said the building had barely been renovated since 2002. She even gave me a map. I walked the halls like a ghost retracing his death. The gym, the science lab, the murals in the stairwell with faded animals and chipped stars. Then I found the basement door. It was still there, different lock, but the same heavy wood and brass knob. It wasn't on the map she gave me. I waited until the hallway was empty. Then I opened it. The stairs creaked. It smelled like mold and copper. I descended slowly, heart pounding, flashlight in hand, and when I reached the bottom, I stopped cold. The room was empty, mostly, but on the far wall, someone had painted something. Not graffiti, not art, a circle within a circle, interwoven with smaller spirals, just like in the cave. Beneath it, in small, trembling white letters, she listens under the floor. There was no furniture, no boxes, just dust and this symbol. I took a photo. As I turned to leave, I heard something behind me. Not a voice, not a sound, a sensation, like pressure, like something exhaling slowly against the back of my neck. I ran. I didn't stop until I was outside. Gasping in the daylight, people staring. I didn't care. I knew I wasn't done. I needed to find the others, or whatever was left of them. I started digging into family records, school yearbooks, parent forums. Most families had left town years ago. A few were still around. One in particular caught my attention, the Bishop family. Marcy's brother, Sean, still lived in the area. He ran a small auto repair shop on the edge of town. I found him there, under the hood of a car. He didn't recognize me at first. But when I said my name, he went pale. Jesus, he whispered, I always wondered what happened to you. We talked. He remembered Marcy. How she used to talk about dreams she had before the hike. Dreams of being buried. Dreams of footsteps above her. Dreams of a woman calling her name, but only when her eyes were closed. The day before she vanished, Marcy had drawn something in her notebook. Sean still had the page. He showed me. It was the same damn spiral. The same tree root shape. Under it, in block letters, she isn't from the forest. She's beneath it. I asked him what that meant. He shook his head. Marcy said if you step where she stepped, you can't unstep it. Said the earth remembers you. I asked where Marcy used to go when she wanted to be alone. He hesitated, then said, there's an old drainage tunnel near the woods behind the school. She used to sit there. Said it made her feel quiet. I went there. I had to. It took an hour to find. Overgrown, rusted over, half buried in leaves and thyme. The tunnel mouth was wide enough to crouch inside, just barely. And someone had tied a red ribbon to a root near the entrance. I didn't touch it. I stepped inside. The smell hit me first, wet stone, iron, and something faintly sweet, like decay. I followed the tunnel until it curved, my flashlight bouncing off old concrete and forgotten graffiti. Then I saw it. Another shoe. Same kind, same size, same brand as the first. Except this one was pristine. Not new, just untouched. Untouched by time. It was sitting upright, facing deeper into the tunnel. And beside it, scrawled in charcoal across the wall, was one word. Just one, written in a child's uneven hand. Alma. I turned around, and in that moment, just for a second, I swore I saw shadows move at the mouth of the tunnel. As if someone had been standing there, watching, and when I got outside, there was no ribbon on the route. I didn't sleep that night. I left the tunnel and drove aimlessly until dawn, ending up in a Motel 3 towns over where the clerk didn't even look up from her magazine. I locked the door, pushed a chair under the knob, and sat on the bed with the lights on. I kept checking the corner of the room, because I kept thinking something was going to step out. Nothing did, but the silence was too heavy, like the air was waiting for something to happen. I opened my laptop and did the one thing I'd avoided all these years. I searched for photos of the missing. Not just names, not just headlines. I wanted faces. Adrian Klein, Benjamin Calder, Marcy Bishop, Kayla Thorne, Owen Strick, Laura King, Malcolm Yates. 12 kids. I tried to stare at their photos and remember what their voices sounded like, the way they laughed or walked or kicked at dirt with board shoes. I couldn't. Only flashes. Only fear. I noticed something strange, though. 3 of the kids, in their school portraits, wore the same exact pin. A tiny metal brooch shaped like a starburst. The design looked old-fashioned, like something from the 50s. It wasn't part of any school uniform. I remembered vaguely that Adrian once said his mother gave him a special badge to wear for luck. Laura too. But why would 3 different parents give their kids the exact same antique-looking brooch? Unless it wasn't a gift. Unless it was something else. I looked closer at the pins. They weren't identical. One had 7 points. One had 6. One had 5. And the center of each one had a circle. Or a spiral. The images were too blurry. I made a note. Called it the pattern. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it mattered. The next day, I found the old school records office. Convinced the sleepy clerk to let me view the incident folder for the 2001 hike. She didn't know I'd already been listed in the file. Once she saw my name, she stepped aside. The folder was thin, depressingly so. A couple of statements, a basic route map, a brief note from a counselor saying I was highly dissociative and should be left alone to heal. But tucked at the very back, almost forgotten, was something else. A Polaroid. It wasn't labeled. I almost missed it. The photo was faded, slightly warped with time, but the image was unmistakable. A group of children standing in the woods, off-trail. Their backs were to the camera. One of them, center frame, was wearing a red ribbon in her hair. The others were looking at her. All except one boy, facing slightly away from the group. His head turned, as if staring directly at whoever took the photo. It was me. I don't remember that moment. I don't remember that photo being taken. But it was me. Same haircut, same jacket, same scar on the eyebrow from when I fell off my bike in 3rd grade. I flipped the photo over. A date was scribbled in pencil, October 10, 2001. That was 2 days after we disappeared. I left the records office shaking. The air outside felt thinner, like the world had shifted and no one else noticed. I walked without thinking, past the park, past the gas station, until I found myself at the trailhead. The one we'd taken that day. The old sign was still there, though the paint had worn off. Someone had carved initials into it, AK, MB, and below it, faintly, follow the line, but not the path. The woods felt wrong, still too quiet, no birdsong. I stood there for a long time. Then I stepped forward. I knew I shouldn't, But some part of me believed that whatever happened back then had started here. Maybe it could be undone. Or understood. The trail was overgrown, but I followed it. Past the first bend, past the tree with the broken limb. And then, the fork. It was still there. I recognized the slope, the birch trees, the way the light didn't quite reach the forest floor. I walked down it, carefully, slowly, like retracing a dream. At some point, I stopped checking the time. The forest thickened. I passed a fallen log that looked vaguely like a twisted human form. I passed stones arranged in a circle. And then, just past a rise, I saw them. Objects, scattered at the base of a moss-covered stump. A cracked plastic water bottle. A frayed friendship bracelet. A single mitten. A folded note. I knelt down. My hands shook as I opened the paper. It was yellowed, barely legible. Written in pencil. Don't follow her voice. It lies. The trees turn when you're not looking. I saw him again. The one with no shadow. Ben says he can hear the hum, even when it's quiet. I looked around. The woods felt tighter, closer, the air heavier. I stood up and turned. And saw a figure, far between the trees. Small, still. I blinked and it was gone. I turned and walked quickly back the way I came. Only, the trail behind me was different. Wrong. The light had changed. Shadows stretched too long. The moss glowed faintly in places. I walked faster, then ran. Branches clawed at my arms. I tripped once, twice. My knee bled. When I finally burst back onto the main trail, I fell to my knees. Gasping. And behind me, for just a moment, I heard a sound I hadn't heard in years. Children laughing, but not happily. Not at all. The only adult who went with us that day and wasn't listed in any of the official reports, no interviews. No statements, no mention at all, was Mr. Hollenbeck. Technically, Thomas Hollenbeck, 6th grade teacher, mid-30s, taught history and coached cross-country. Everyone liked him. He was the kind of teacher that made you feel seen, made learning fun, made you want to impress him. But after the disappearance, it was like he never existed. I remembered him clearly. His clipboard, the way he wore his watch on the inside of his wrist, how he'd whistle the same 3-note tune when walking ahead. I couldn't find a single photo of him from that year. The staff photos from 2001 were missing 2 names, his and Mrs. Crane's. Hers made sense. She vanished. But he didn't. He came back, didn't he? I wasn't sure anymore. I started digging. Deep. Old district employee rosters. Property records. Alumni forums. I found something strange. A Thomas Hollenbeck had purchased land 2 weeks before the hike, out in Umatilla County, near an abandoned ranger station. Then vanished. No trace. The deed was never transferred, taxes stopped being paid in 2003, and the property was listed as inactive in the county database. I went there. It took me 5 hours to reach the edge of the parcel. The road was barely drivable. Trees pressed in on both sides like they didn't want to let me through. The station was small, 1 story, half collapsed, paint peeling off in layers. The forest had started reclaiming it. Ivy swallowed the corners. A fallen tree had crushed the porch roof. I parked, stepped out, and immediately felt it. The pressure, that same wrong air I'd felt near the spiral in the school basement. Still, watching, I forced myself inside. The floor groaned. Dust coated everything like frost. The wallpaper had peeled away in sheets, revealing scribbled writing underneath. Dozens of messages, all the same hand, all slightly different. She comes when you leave the path. He said the spiral would stop her. No one remembers the names right. If you say her name twice, you lose your own. The kids said the trees were hungry. Don't sleep here. In the center of the room, a metal folding table. On it, maps, dozens of them, hand-drawn, annotated, circles drawn in thick red marker. Arrows, X's, notes, last known hum, 3.7 miles SE. 7-point star found here. Not rusted. They were never lost. They were taken. I turned one over and found a list. Names. Our names. All 12 of us. Beside each, something handwritten, a K, voice sensitive, resistive B. C. Responds to hum, incomplete MB. Proximity contact, red marker OS. Untested, unknown threat LK. Phase susceptible, avoided MY. Coiled presence, trimmer I didn't see my name. Not anywhere. Then, in the margin, scribbled sideways, unknown boy, survived, why? My hands trembled. I looked closer. The paper wasn't dated, but the pen was new. And on the floor nearby, crumbs. A coffee cup, still faintly warm. I wasn't alone. I backed toward the doorway. The floor creaked, and then I heard it. That whistle. 3 notes. Slow, deliberate, same one he always used in class. I froze. The sound was coming from outside. Then a voice. Calm, male, familiar. You shouldn't have come here. I turned and ran. I didn't look back. Branches clawed at me. Roots grabbed at my shoes. But I ran, got in the car, peeled out so hard I sprayed gravel into the trees. I drove until I saw power lines again. Then I pulled over and vomited. I didn't know if it was him. I didn't know if he was alive. But I knew this, Mr. Hollenbeck had never intended to be found. And whatever he had started with that hike, it wasn't over. I knew I couldn't do this alone anymore. Not because I was scared, though I was, but because I felt like the further I went, the more something was trying to twist what I remembered. Every hour spent chasing the past, the less certain I was about the order of events. Like the timeline was fraying. I needed someone who had lived in it longer than me. Someone who hadn't escaped. That's when I remembered Lara King. Or rather, her parents. They had never left Baker City. I remembered hearing, years ago, that they'd kept her room exactly the same. As if she might walk back in at any moment. I drove to their street just after sunset. Their house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac. White shutters, brick steps, the kind of house that looks normal until you stare too long and realize all the windows are covered from the inside. I knocked once, then twice. I heard movement, slow, reluctant. The door opened and Mrs. King stared at me like I was an old ghost. "You're the boy," she said. "The one who came back." I nodded. She didn't ask who I was. Just opened the door wider. Inside smelled like mothballs and lavender. And something else, something like earth. The TV was on in the living room, but muted. A fire crackled, even though it was warm outside. Mr. King sat in a recliner, unmoving, watching me like he didn't blink anymore. "You shouldn't have come alone," he said, flat, "but I guess she brought you." I didn't ask who she was. I followed Mrs. King down the hallway. "We knew someone would come eventually," she said. "Not the police. Not those men from Salem. Someone who remembered." Her voice never rose above a whisper. She opened a door near the end of the hall. This is where she left it. Lara's room was exactly as I remembered. Posters from 2001 on the walls. An old Lisa Frank diary on the desk. Stickers on the mirror. The kind of time capsule only grief can maintain. But on the bed, something new. A box. Cardboard. Shoe-sized. Mrs. King sat on the edge of the bed and gestured for me to open it. I lifted the lid. Inside, a stack of photographs. Not printed from a store. Not developed. Polaroids. Faded at the edges, curling with age. I flipped through the first few. Trees. Dark forest. Slightly blurry. Then, children. At first, just shapes. But the more I looked, the more familiar they became. One of them was Lara. Sitting by a creek, staring straight into the camera. Expressionless. Mud on her cheek. Hair wet. Another showed Marcy standing near a wooden arch, her eyes closed. Someone was behind her, blurry, tall, shape indistinct. Next photo, Benjamin, lying in the dirt, hands folded over his chest. His mouth open like he was speaking or screaming. I felt sick. "These came in the mail," Mrs. King whispered. "One a year, always in October. No return address." I counted. 21 photos. I flipped to the last one. It was taken in the woods. But not the same woods. Not Oregon. I didn't know how I knew that, just a feeling. In the foreground, something small. Something recent. A child's shoe, half buried. And beside it, a Polaroid photo. The one I was holding. It was in the photo. Like the picture was taken after the photo had already been placed there. I stared. A cold sweat ran down my back. Behind the shoe, just barely visible, stood a figure. Not a child, not an adult either. Something long, like it had limbs but no weight. I dropped the picture. Mrs. King didn't flinch. "They're not gone," she said. "But they're not living either." I asked her what she meant. She said nothing, just stared past me, into the hallway. So I turned, and for a second, I swear, I saw Lara. Standing at the end of the hall. Just a silhouette, hair wet, feet muddy, and in her hand, a red ribbon. Then gone, just like that. I drove back to the forest. Not the public trail, not the park entrance. Deeper, remote access roads, long abandoned logging paths. Faded tire tracks overgrown with moss. The map from Hollenbeck's station was wrinkled and torn, but still legible. His annotations were strange, distances measured in intervals, and something he called sound pockets. Near the center, a point marked with thick red pen. Route. I parked where the road turned to dirt and walked the rest of the way. Through dense trees, past stone piles and oddly shaped clearings. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. Not peaceful quiet, pressurized quiet, like sound itself had weight and something was pushing it down. I passed a wooden structure, rotting posts, barely standing, maybe the remains of a footbridge or an old boundary marker. Covered in carvings, spirals, circles, 7-point stars. The air grew cold, not cool, cold, as if something had sucked the heat from the world. Then I saw it. The root, not a literal tree root. But that's the best word I have. A gnarled mass of stone and earth, rising from the forest floor in the shape of a tangled heart. Not a natural formation, not a sculpture either. Something in between. Its surface was carved with hundreds of overlapping spirals and symbols. At its center, a hollow. Round, like the mouth of a well. I stepped closer. My head pounded, ears rang, static crawled up my spine. I looked inside. Darkness, thick, layered black, but not empty. I saw movement, like water, but slower. Something shifting. I dropped a small stone inside. No sound. Then, a moment later, a whisper, not out loud, inside me. It said a name, my name, whispered like it had been forgotten for centuries. I fell back, gasping, hands shaking. Then I heard voices. Children, laughter, far away, like echoes trapped in a bottle. And one of them, clear, calling. Over here. It was Adrian. I hadn't heard his voice in 24 years. I turned, scanning the trees. And saw them, children, standing between the trees, watching, motionless, pale, dressed in what they wore in 2001. None of them moved, but they were real, not ghosts, not shadows, something else. Then one of them, Marcy, lifted her hand slowly. Pointed behind me. I turned. The well was glowing faintly. A soft red, and something, was climbing out. Not fast, not frantic, slow, like it knew it had all the time in the world. I ran, didn't look back, didn't breathe until I hit the car and peeled out in reverse down the trail, branches scraping the windows. I drove for 2 hours straight before stopping. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Whatever route was, it was still open. And someone, or something, was still using it. I didn't go home, couldn't. The car felt like the only safe place, and even that was starting to feel thinner. Like the protection was wearing off. I kept seeing flashes in the mirror, movement on the side of the road that vanished when I turned my head. Whispers when the radio was off. A hum deep in my ears that wouldn't go away. I drove until the sun started to rise, then pulled over near a truck stop and opened the last of Hollenbeck's maps. There was one section I hadn't noticed before, taped to the back of the larger layout. It wasn't a map, it was a diagram, a circle, with 12 lines coming out from the center, like spokes. Each spoke ended in a name. The names of the missing. And in the very center, a word in red ink, vessel? There was one other name on the page. Scrawled in the margin. My name, underlined, followed by 3 words, resisted, remained, unknown. That's when it hit me. Hollenbeck hadn't just been mapping places. He was mapping us. He thought I was different. Resisted what? Remained where? Why unknown? I flipped the page and saw notes in tiny handwriting. Observations. One stood out. Post-return subject shows signs of partial severance. Residual awareness. No full merging. No consistent dreaming. Possibly outside of the circuit. Circuit. Circle. Vessel. I wasn't part of it. Not fully. But the others were. I thought about the Polaroids. How each one showed the kids in increasingly unnatural positions. Expressions blank, or worse, like they weren't there anymore. Like something else was wearing them. I remembered something my therapist asked me when I was 13, during the one session I agreed to after I came back. Do you ever feel like you didn't come back alone? I laughed at the time. Shrugged it off. Now I wasn't sure I had. I started driving again. There was one last place I had to go. The school. Again. But not to the building. To the basement. To the door behind the boiler that was always locked. The one we used to joke about. The one some kids swore they saw glow at night. I broke in through the side entrance. It wasn't hard. Old building. Rusted locks. The basement was colder than before. Not dusty, clean. Too clean. Like someone had been there recently. I found the door. Behind it, stairs. Old ones. Steep. Leading down. Not to a lower floor. Below that, into the foundation, into stone, into dirt. The walls were covered in carvings. Not drawn, scraped, symbols I'd seen before, spirals, root marks. But one wall was different. It had photos, dozens, hundreds, the missing, not just from my class, from other schools, other decades, all posed the same, standing in forests, near rocks, some smiling, some crying, all looking at the camera. But the last row, bottom right, was different. It was of me, photos I didn't remember being taken. Me sleeping, me at the cave, me at the motel, me holding the map. They had been following me, documenting, waiting. I turned and saw a desk. Old wood, burned along one edge, and on it, an object I hadn't seen in over 20 years. My backpack, the one I wore on the hike, still zipped. I opened it slowly. Inside, my old flashlight, a half-eaten granola bar, a note, folded. It wasn't in my handwriting, but it was to me. If you're reading this, you're not just a survivor. You're a crack in the pattern. They can't hold you, but they can use you. She knows you're looking. She'll make you remember things you never saw. She'll make you see things you never forgot. Don't go to the creek. Not yet. That's where she finishes it. It wasn't signed, but the handwriting looked like mine. From when I was 12. The road to the creek wasn't on any map. I remembered it from childhood, or maybe from dreams. A winding path off the old utility road, half swallowed by undergrowth and memory. I parked where the trees began to press in and walked the rest. The hum was louder here. Not like sound, like feeling, like something vibrating inside bone. I didn't try to resist it anymore. The forest looked older. The light didn't reach the ground. It was dusk, but it felt later. I passed a tree with initials carved deep. Not fresh, not old. I recognized the letters, AK and MB again. The same as on the trail sign. But this time, beneath them, we saw her. The creek came into view slowly. First the sound, gentle, bubbling. Then the glint of water between trunks. Then the clearing. It was exactly like the photo in my mind, the one I didn't remember seeing. Shallow water, smooth stones, a single dead tree leaning over the bank like it was trying to drink. On the far side, a narrow stone ledge. And in the middle of it all, an object. Small, soft, fabric, a shoe, the same one from the cave. But it wasn't old anymore. It was new. It was mine, the one I was wearing when we started the hike in 2001. I stepped closer. The creek didn't make sound when I crossed. My feet didn't get wet. Nothing rippled, like I was walking across a painting of water. I knelt down, reached for the shoe, and heard a voice. You never left. It was behind me. I didn't turn, because some part of me knew, if I turned, I would see myself. Not a copy, not a twin. Me, the part that stayed, the part that saw everything. The part that was still there. I spoke, quietly. Why me? The answer came slow, gentle. Because you saw her, and you didn't look away. The shoe turned to ash in my hand. I stood. Around the creek, the trees began to shift, not moving, just changing. Branches bending at impossible angles, leaves darkening, bark cracking in slow spirals. And then they stepped out. The children, all of them. Marcy, Adrian, Laura, Owen, Benjamin, Malcolm, Kayla, all 12. They weren't aged. They weren't kids either. They looked like time forgot how to shape them. They stood around the clearing, watching. Not sad, not happy, just still. And one of them, Marcy, stepped forward. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. A Polaroid. She handed it to me. I looked. It was a picture of the creek. Of me, standing here, holding the photo. Behind me, in the image, was the woman. Hair long, face hidden, hands on my shoulders. And beneath the photo, written in my own handwriting. This is where it ends. I don't remember how I got back to the car. Or the drive. Just waking up in a motel hours later. Everything I owned laid out neatly on the dresser, the Polaroid face down. I left it there. It's been weeks. I don't dream anymore. I don't sleep well either. But something's different now. The hum is gone. The kids are still missing. Officially. But I think they're not waiting to be found. I think they're watching. Not for rescue. For permission. For the next one. Maybe for you. And if you ever go hiking near Baker City, if you find a path that's not on your map, don't follow the ribbon, because she will notice you. And she remembers your name. Even if you forgot it.